Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I am a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph. I teach at the Dominican House of Studies, and I work for the Thomistic Institute, and this is Pines of the Aquinas. I'd like to talk a little bit about G.K. Chesterton, because I am deeply indebted to G.K. Chesterton, or I'm super grateful, super appreciative for what he has done for me. Why? Well, kind of like as part of my own ongoing conversion, I had to discover that the church's intellectual life is something rigorous and vigorous, that the church has reasons for her belief, and that those reasons are well articulated, well argued, and that they're beautiful. And it was really Chesterton who helped me to see that for the first time. So I want to give you 5 reasons for which I love G.K. Chesterton as a way to commend him to your readership. So here we go. Okay, maybe by way of further introduction, I started reading G.K. Chesterton a little bit at the end of high school and then in the beginning of college, and then a lot more in the novitiate. So my sister Rebecca had also gone to Steubenville, and she read G.K. Chesterton. It had been assigned to her while she was there, and then she got into it and picked him up in the years since. And so she would, quote and, send along things that she had found in Chesterton, and I was always interested and sometimes, excited at the prospect of diving deeper. But I only read like a little bit in high school and then maybe a little bit in college. And then we had a group of guys who got together to talk about things of faith and then to go on adventures called the GK. And there was more G.K. Chesterton to be had in that blessed company. And it was just like against this backdrop that when I went to the novitiate, and I was encouraged, like not so much to start our formal study of St. Thomas Aquinas, because it was communicated to us like, listen, these things are going to be set before you in pedagogical fashion. You need time to think them through. You also need time to develop a philosophical and theological habit of mind. So maybe take some time here to read more spirituality, maybe even read some literature and kind of like work your way into the studies that you'll experience at the Dominican House. And so I was like, that sounds great. And I read a ton of Chesterton during the novitiate. And then in my first year of studies, I was like, okay, I'm going to read some sweet philosophy and supplement with some sweet history and theology, but I'm also going to read some sweet Chesterton. And I did, and I profited from it. And I'm super grateful. And so, like, when I think about the ways in which Chesterton has influenced my own life, I tried to kind of cook it down to 5 points, 5 reasons for which I love G.K. Chesterton, and you might love G.K. Chesterton too. I realize, though, in saying this, like, I don't recommend too terribly many things except like the precepts of the church and the Gospel of John, because, yeah, people are different. They have different temperaments. And for some people, reading Chesterton is alienating. You're like, what is this man saying? Or even frustrating. It's like, did he just spend 3 pages setting up a pun? But I think that a lot of Catholics and a lot of Christians find Chesterton to be delightful. And I know of people who have been converted from unbelief to belief by Chesterton or by reading Chesterton and the grace of God at work in those pages. So, yeah, it might be for you, it might not be for you, but I found it to be delightful. I found him to be delightful, and you might as well. Okay, so 5 points, five reasons for which I love G.K. Chesterton. The first is his worldview. Worldview is kind of a sterile and silly word, but what I mean is his contemplative gaze on God and reality. Because I think a lot of us, we have a kind of mundane or workaday gaze on God and reality. We're like, all right, there's rules to be followed, there's tasks to be done, let's get to it. But Chesterton, he gazes on God and reality with a sense of profound wonder, with a sense that all that he has, he might not have had, like a sense of its contingency. It could not have been, it could have been otherwise. And as a result of which, the fact that it's a gift is very much present to him throughout the whole course of his life. So he has this beautiful little meditation on a dandelion, what like the optimist might say about it, what the pessimist might say about it, and then what he is drawn to say about it is like, wow, it's perfect, it's ideal because it could not have been or it could have been otherwise. And so he proposes this kind of posture, not so much of optimism or pessimism before reality, but of like what he calls patriotism. The fact that you love it because it's yours, because it's been given to you, because it's been entrusted to you. And he thinks that that kind of basic foundational love is what really transforms life. It's what makes life wonderful. Our relationships wonderful, our places wonderful, our engagements wonderful. And so, yeah, he has a sense for the fact that the world is created, that it's given to us by a creator. When he refers to St. Thomas Aquinas in his book about him, he'll say that if he were to have taken one of these kind of more elaborate religious names, as you'll find in some congregations or some religious orders, he said he would have been St. Thomas of the Creator, because St. Thomas, in part, communicates this same vision of an appreciation for creation, of its status as a gift, of our dependence upon God, and of the contingency of all that is. But yeah, as a result of which, the way in which we can refer all that is back to God. Okay, so that's first, worldview. Second thing is his insight. And this kind of follows from the first, because I think that Chesterton's really good at identifying what's essential and what's accidental. So he's like a lot of us encounter him through his essays, which essays are sometimes critical of the thoughts of his contemporaries. And so like he has this cool essay about progress, for instance. And he makes similar observations as other Catholic contemporaries like Christopher Dawson. But he's critical of people like Wells, who say, by technological means, we're going to advance in a kind of unstinting incline. And he's like, listen, this whole progress ideology, it just doesn't hold up against our human experience, because like we're not just going to evolve automatically, or we're not just going to evolve mechanistically. Like if we can be sure of something, it's not so much that we'll evolve, it's that we will devolve if left to our own devices, because the only thing that's going to work itself out automatically or mechanistically is original sin. So he's got this kind of keen insight. He's got this incisive gaze into reality at its heart, at its core, whereby he identifies what's essential and what's, accidental. And I think as a result, he's not taken in, or he's less easily taken in by ideology or passing fancy. He has a sense for like the perennial life, or for the perennial teaching. And you'll see him use this even in fiction, in literature. Like the thing that's cool about his Father Brown stories, his detective fiction, is that what gives Father Brown insight into reality is the fact that he's a priest. So he has care of souls. So he knows what's in the heart of man, like our Lord Jesus Christ, whom the priest images, or whom the priest imitates. And so for him, like solving mysteries isn't a matter of being like a really advanced intellect with an opium addiction, as it was for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. For him, it's a matter of having a sympathy with humanity, for knowing what's in the heart of man. And the priest is the character who's best suited to kind of tell that forth, because he's entered most intimately into reality by his association with God, which I find, beautiful. And so Chesterton comes before his experience with this kind of curiosity and with this kind of honesty, and he's able to mediate that to you, to the reader, with a kind of burst of insight. So there's so many things that I've read in Chesterton which remain with me even at present. Like I was just talking with a friend the other day about the youthfulness of God. This idea that, Chesterton will talk about how the child is content to play the same game over and over, and that it exhausts the adult when the child says again, again, again. But we see a kind of youthfulness in the divine behavior, in the divine comportment. Even in the movement of the heavens, he'll say, like the fact that the sun rises each morning is testimony to the fact that God does not grow weary of saying again, again, again. So there's stuff like that I just, I love. I find especially beautiful. Another thing that I love about Chesterton is his energy. And you see this in his literary output. So I think Ignatius Press has collected his works in something like 37 volumes, but some of those volumes are in several parts or 3 parts, something like that. So he wrote a lot, and I don't know how that compares to St. Augustine or St. Thomas Aquinas, but it seems like he wrote a lot. And I've really profited from reading almost everything that he's ever written. And I think in part it's like, that was his métier. So he was an essayist. The last, 9, 10 volumes of his collected works are the weekly essays that he submitted to the Illustrated London Times, or the London Illustrated Times. I've forgotten the exact name of things, so correct me in the comments. But it's like he was just, he worked under deadlines, and he just continued to generate content. And I think that for anybody who writes, or anybody who generates content of whatever sort, one recognizes how exhausting that can be, or kind of how depleting the grind often proves. But Chesterton was a warrior, like he was a battler, and he knew that, like in the combat for truth against the forces of falsity, that you have to occupy the field of battle. Like, you're not going to strike down all of your enemies, but you can scare them. You can intimidate them. And the way to do so for Chesterton was to occupy the field of battle with words. And so you see come forth from his pen a kind of tide of words, a beautiful tide of words. Not egomaniacal words, not self-centered words, but humble words, words of service. There's a story told about Chesterton that at the end of his life, he was visited by a Dominican friar with whom he had been close friends, Father Vincent McNabb. and that Father Vincent McNabb extended to him a kind of Dominican privilege of singing the Salve Regina over Chesterton's expiring body. And then before he left the room, McNabb is said to have picked up Chesterton's pen and to have kissed it. And in the introduction to one of the versions of Chesterton's autobiography, the author who writes the story, I think it's Randall Payne, says, for that pen, speaking of Chesterton's pen, told best the story of its possessor by pointing awesomely and adamantly to someone else. And he likens it to the long, bony finger of St. John the Baptist. And so we can say about Chesterton, he must increase and I must decrease, like God must increase and Chesterton must decrease. There's the sense that, like, Chesterton's a humble man. He's a self-forgetful man. He writes with a kind of prolix prose that often enough tells you more about himself than it does about his subject matter. But there's like a whimsy to it, right? There's just like a wonder to it, which shows forth this awesome energy that, like the long bony finger of St. John the Baptist, the pen of Chesterton tells best the story of its possessor. It tells best of its possessor by pointing awesomely and adamantly to someone else. He must increase, I must decrease. So I just love that energy, that kind of humble, simple, wonderful energy that you experience in Chesterton's writing. The next thing is there's like a humanity to Chesterton, which I love. So like he's critical of things, and whenever someone is critical of things, there's a risk that you lose a hold on that man or that woman's humanity because it just becomes a matter of like trenchant critique. And that's just tough. That's a tough genre in which to operate for a long time without dehumanizing or being dehumanized. But with Chesterton, you have this sense that he always retains a hold on his humanity, or that he always embodies his humanity. Also, with reference to his autobiography, some people notice that there's no real mention of his wife, Frances Chesterton. And apparently it's because she told him not to include her in his autobiography, because she knew that if he did, it would be all about her. And so she wanted him to tell his story, even if it meant the exclusion of her in more balanced fashion. And it's clear that Chesterton loved his wife. There's a kind of dedicatory line in one of his first collections of essays, or maybe it was either Greybeards at Play or The Ballad of the White Horse, where he says, therefore, I bring these lines to you who brought the cross to me, because it was his wife who really introduced him to Christianity or to the Lord. And he had this like real tender and like sweet appreciation for her, not just for that, but for her. And it was a sadness for them that they couldn't have children, but I think they had extended family, and Chesterton loved to kind of muck around with the kids and impress them with his heroic feats, one of which apparently was his just incredible consumption of food would cause like great delight amongst the children. I'm going to close my window here for a second because they're doing work outside. Stay with me. That might be the first time that I've interrupted a video in the middle to close a window, but when you're 13 minutes in, you just got to send it. So Chesterton's humanity, like he would, impress even his little nieces and nephews or his extended family by feats of strength, like the consumption of large amounts of food, which to you might sound like gluttony, or at the very least, like something other than abstinence and sobriety. But you can appreciate that this man is like, he's a man of a certain silliness, of a certain whimsy, of a certain caprice, but like a thoroughly human man, a man of friendships, a man of attachments, a man of engagement. I love him. So then the last thing maybe is just to take a further point from that, like his hilarity, his whimsy. There's a famous line at the end of Orthodoxy that he sets up for a couple of pages where he's talking about like the hidden life of our Lord Jesus Christ, the things that don't necessarily come through in the pages of the Gospels, but which we can infer or we can reason are present in our Lord. And what he reasons is present therein is his mirth, right? Like our Lord's own hilarity. And maybe we do get glimpses of that, like when you read the Gospel and he talks about having a beam in your eye that you ought remove first before you look to the splinter in the eye of your neighbor. So maybe our Lord is funny. I don't know. That's a question to be entertained at greater length in another setting. But like Chesterton had this insight into the kind of cosmic hilarity of all of creation. And you see this like in the way that he describes, for instance, our status as creatures, or like the arrangement of our first parents in the Garden of Eden, the fact that they had to obey, that they couldn't take from the fruit of the knowledge of like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says, like, it might sound arbitrary to you, but like all of us have to observe a kind of law of conditional joy, and like the ideas that he spins out on the basis of that are so funny, but like you get it, like he sees the kind of hilarity, as it were, or whimsy at the heart of reality, and he's able to rejoice in that. He's able to revel in that. And to some of us, that might seem foreign to our experience if we find life kind of characterized more by negative emotions than positive emotions. But I get the impression that Chesterton struggled with the things with which we struggle, but that he believed, that he hoped, that he loved in a kind of aspirational way towards a richer reality than is often the one we choose to see or we choose to remark upon. And so I think that Chesterton as an author can help us with our own aspirations to be better believers and hopers and lovers. And he helps us certainly, to I don't know, with gaining eyes to see and with gaining a mind to think and gaining a heart to love. That's a somewhat incoherent statement, but I hope that it is of profit to you. So I want to commend Chesterton to your readership. I hope that he will help you along the way. You might start with those Father Brown stories. They're like some of the most approachable things. His literature, I don't know that it stands up as literature. I'm sure that literary theorists have many criticisms to make because of excesses or defects, but a lot of people, I like The Man Who Was Thursday, Man Alive, The Flying In, and those would be the ones with which I might begin if I were to read some of his novels. And then when it comes to his essays and his books, a lot of folks still profit from, orthodoxy is kind of the classic text. His lives of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Thomas Aquinas are super beautiful. I think his life of St. Francis of Assisi was the first thing of his that I read, which I just love. Like the fact that St. Francis sees the world best by standing on his head as the juggler of God or the troubadour of the Blessed Virgin Mary by, doing somersaults. He has a better appreciation for what is most lasting in this world and what is least lasting. And then you might also profit from kind of some of the cultural criticism, like what's wrong with the world is a really good example of that. And, if you survey his collected works, you'll find something that suits your fancy because he comments on practically everything under the sun. So maybe it works for you. Maybe it doesn't. At the very least, it's probably worth a try. So this is Pints with Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel and push the bell and get sweet email updates when other things come out. And then, let's see, I contribute to a podcast called Godsplaining. We often do episodes about literature. So it's like literature and this person or that person or the other person. And we did one about Chesterton way back when, which you might enjoy. And we've done other ones about other literary figures in the time since. So that's what I got. Know of my prayers for you. Please pray for me, and I'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Pints with Aquinas.